And I think this applies for any content creator. Like, you just need to learn how to be consistent. Your marketing doesn't even matter that much, because when on your first year, you're just learning. I would go as far as say, I'm pretty radical on this. Like, we need to do hard things. And it develops us in a way that shouldn't be avoided in our age. And I think culture can tell you to take care of yourself in a way where you should avoid doing hard things. But oftentimes, what it misses, and this is the nuance of finding purpose to do hard things.
So in terms of finding your purpose, literally sit down in a room, put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Don't have any other person disturb you. Have a pen and a piece of paper and start writing.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Chasing Lightning podcast, where I help you live slow, move fast, and start things so that you can do so sustainably. Whew, it's good to be back. Guys, this is a really special episode because our guest today has actually been on the podcast before, but not only that, but this guest has also been one of the most requested people to come back, actually. I've had many people come to me saying this guest is one of their favorites because they just delivered so much insight, value, and richness in experience based on their story. And all my guests have provided that. But this particular guest has apparently done even the best in terms of the views on my YouTube video. So I am super happy to have this guest back. We are great friends. And not only that, but we are also really great at pushing each other to becoming better at our craft. And this is the one and only Mridul Prasad. Yes, the co-founder of the six-figure Startup Collegiate. And in this episode, he shares some really big news actually on what's going to be the next step for Collegiate. So if you're watching this episode or listening, tuning in, and you want to know how to go through the process of scaling a startup to the point where you're getting the attention of some of the most prestigious companies, VCs, and startups in the world, then this is an episode for you, because Mridul breaks some really important news on what will be the next step for his startup. And it's really big. So I don't want to spoil that. Tune in for the episode to figure out what happens. But in this episode, we really talk about our career journeys, interestingly. I think if you just imagine yourself in a place where you just don't know what you are doing with your career, or if you feel like you're lost and you've just been through the process of hustling so much that you just lost vision of the meaning of your work and your why, and you start questioning yourself of like, what am I doing? What are things that I'm good at? What am I really bad at? And you start going through that process of self-discovery that we share about like what that looked like for us in the past 2 years being sophomores in college. So we dive into that conversation. We get vulnerable about the things that we've just been processing, and really what are the exciting directions of our careers from this point on? Like, how do you learn to regain vision in your career? And if you were kind of lost, like, what are the first steps? And how do you learn to like compound that? And because, I've been surrounded with some really incredible people that have just, for some reason, learned how to figure that out. And we dive into like, how does it feel to kind of have that feeling and to get to that point? So it's a really great conversation. We also dive into some of the things that we are going through as we're looking for apartments. So if you're also in that process of looking for apartments or are about to navigate that process, or if you've been dealing with interesting landlords in the past, then we also break down what that's been like for us. So I don't want to hold you guys any further. This is a great episode. And it's actually so great that we just like literally start like yapping, and we just start having really good conversation even before we were planning to start. So we also included that part in. So let's dive into it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the one and only Mridul Prasad. Like, dude, and what's interesting? Like, I actually thought of getting you know how right now I don't have a ring light. Usually I do have it. But I started like looking at like the video quality and the lighting without it, and it looks the same, to be honest. Like, I don't see that much of a difference, at least. And I think that I tend to overcomplicate the setup, even though I only have like a couple things. So I was thinking, shoot, I lost my ring light. I should buy even better light now. But now I'm realizing like it looks the same. Like, what's the difference? Sometimes we overcomplicate our craft so much that it's hard for us to make meaningful work.
Wow. This guy's already spitting.
No, bro, but it's true. Like, I was just like looking, because I also have like big plans to improve the quality of this podcast, not just in terms of like the lighting, but also in the sound and in the editing. And I want to scale this so that not necessarily scale, but outsource and improve this so much that I can create noticeable results for my audience. But then I started really thinking about it, and I was like, what am I actually doing? Is this going to make anything of what I do even simpler? And on that end, I want to make things a bit more inadvertently complicated. And I know that really like demotivates me, because when I have to like set things up, like, dude, it's a lot of work. And upgrading like your equipment is great, but there comes a point where you're making the process so complicated that it's removing the art of simplicity. And even like when I'm like making clips, I've been realizing that I haven't been as consistent with my clips. And I started like asking myself, like, am I doing something wrong to the podcast? And I was reminded by this other clip from this guy I follow who has this thing called like the Scrappy Podcast Marketing Academy. And he talked about how the most important thing you can do as a podcaster when you're just starting, and I think this applies for any content creator, like you just need to learn how to be consistent. Your marketing doesn't even matter that much, because on your first year, you're just learning your footing. And if you focus on going through that process of going through the missteps, including the steps that do put you in the right direction, then that's what really matters, especially on your first year. Because the first year should be that test of, am I going to be consistent enough, or am I just going to like dip when things get hard? And I've been asking myself, like, am I going to dip because it got hard enough where I realized, okay, I discerned that this is too much of a commitment for this season of my life? Or am I going to dip because I was basically like messing myself, I was psyching myself out as a creator, and I overcomplicated the process. I scaled too fast. I upgraded way more than I should have, and I didn't keep it simple enough. So that by the time I was consistent and I knew what my rhythms and my schedules were like as a creator, I can begin to like, oh yeah, okay, let me upgrade this. Let me outsource that. Let me start marketing in this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So how were you able to approach outsourcing or delegating? Because I know right now it's probably just you.
Yeah.
How do you have like a team that you've started to try to build?
No, like I haven't started outsourcing. I just have thought of like ways I could, because one of the easiest ways you can outsource as a podcaster is to like send the editing to someone. The only thing that I like aware of is if I outsource it to someone at this point, like I'm not going to be able to like tell them like, hey, here's how I want it, and here's how I want you to like create this clip or do this, right? Typically, you start doing it when you have reached a point in your production where you know what works and what doesn't. And keep in mind, I'm only 3 months in. Like, actually, no, I'm 4 months. April. Mm-hmm. Is it past the 15th? It's 11. Yo, the 4-month anniversary is coming up soon. Oh my gosh! Wow. Right?
Yeah.
This is significant. Yeah, but like I actually like kept myself from outsourcing until I knew what worked and what didn't. Mm-hmm. And like I said, like it's super important to know that the first year as a creator is when you figure out what works and what doesn't, and for you to make the missteps as you step into the right direction. So you misstep into the right direction. You do that so much over the first year that I don't know if I'll even start doing that until I make it past that point.
Yeah. And as you're going through that process, I think what could help is being intentional about how you're gathering feedback. Because like you said earlier, you're trying to see where are you making the missteps and where are things going right. Mm-hmm. So I would say if you don't already have one, find a process or a system for being able to understand what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And another thing is when you think about outsourcing, even though this is in the future, right now what you could do is break apart the key stages of your podcast process. What I mean by that is there's ideation. Mm-hmm. You have to come up with an idea. Yeah. What is the theme of this podcast going to be? You need to find the guest. That's step 2. I think those stages should still belong to you. Mm-hmm. Step 3 is probably coming prepared with questions. Yeah. And as you go through each stage, think about what part do I absolutely have to keep my hands on? Mm. And the second thing is, what do I want to keep my hands on? Because there's a difference between you being efficient in delegating things as opposed to what do I actually want to work on? Because the thing with starting anything is you're never going to enjoy 100% of it. Okay. So the benefit of delegating is you find someone that enjoys what you hate and they're really good at it. That's like the perfect match. And you go from scripting, questions, actually organizing the equipment. Maybe if you're like at a huge scale, like you would have someone set this equipment up for you. And then in terms of the editing, I'm assuming podcast editing isn't your real passion. It's something you have to do.
Yeah.
But your real passion is being able to make this connection right now. So if you can just double down on doing what you like the most about this and setting up, orchestrating, that's like a word I like to pick, is because it's like very intentional. You're almost like a composer and you get to like design, okay, you're going to be playing this part of the piece. You're playing this part. I get to cook right here. And you get to cook the meal that you want to eat.
Chef Prasad.
Yeah.
Dude, that's good. I don't know if I have like a clearly defined system for feedback yet. And one thing I know works with that on a very practical level is having a community. Like having a group of like podcasters, or it doesn't have to be that many podcasters, but at least having like a few, 2 or 3, where you can like hear each other out and you listen and you hear where when you're connected, when you're lost, when you think that the conversation drifts too far in the wrong direction or maybe in the right direction, right? Spontaneity is good. But at least having some people that can help you in that process. Is that what you meant, or do you have something else in mind in terms of like a system? What is your like feedback system for collegiate or for you? I don't know, yourself.
It's easier for us because we get a lot of comments. So our content is very interaction focused.
Yeah.
Because we're just doing short form. It's hard to get a lot of engagement early when you're doing long form media.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, by the way, sorry to interrupt, but by the collegiate is Mridul Startup. So just for people that don't know.
Yeah. So when you're doing long form media, even we've started to think about how can we start making longer videos.
Yeah.
The trade-off is that you're not going to have as much people, especially at the start. But the few people that actually go through and they consistently watch your stuff, those people will be a lot more loyal to your brand than someone you might get on short form that might just like or comment. But the way we've been getting feedback is we've just been giving out free resources. So, for example, since we're doing educational consulting, if there's a specific resource or like early career development, if there's a resource a lot of students in mechanical engineering want, and we have someone make a video on it, on potential project ideas, and then we have a resource for project scoping, then we could easily hand that off and say, like, if you're interested, comment this down below. And the funny thing about algorithms is even if you get positive or negative comments, it's still boosting interaction regardless. And obviously it's rare for us to get negative comments, but this is like a thing that you shouldn't be afraid of as a content creator. Some people get afraid, like, what happens if people judge me or anything? Well, regardless, you're putting yourself out there. It's just a given, and there's going to be people that are going to like what you do. Just double down on that and really see, like, they'll explicitly say, like, what they want. And if you get a lot of comments over time on one specific topic area, for example, a lot of students were very interested on like a step-by-step process on starting an organization, and or for example a nonprofit, but not like any generic one people do for high school. Like actually coming up with a niche you care about and getting the right support system for that. And the thing with those resources is students have these ideas in the back of their mind, but they're just never able to get that support or that information to be able to execute on it. So for us, it's easier because we'll also make some videos. We'll make some entertainment-based videos, but we'll also be like directly texting people that follow us. If we notice that a lot of people have followed our account, we'll carve out time in our schedule to directly message some of these people and say, hey, and then we'll just say their name or whatever their username is. Just notice you dropped a follow. If you don't mind me asking, what brought you to our page? Just leave it simple. And then let them talk. And then a lot of the times they're like, oh, I was actually had a lot of questions on how to spend my summer most effectively. Or is it too late to get summer internships? Do you guys have any resources here? So I think short form is easy to get immediate feedback. At your scale, there's no problem with just directly messaging people that you follow, even if you're at a scale of like, once you get to a big enough scale, then you can just explicitly just make a video and say, hey, by the way, if you guys want to see like content on this area, comment XYZ. Or if you have any other recommendations, comment XYZ. And by doing that, you don't have to play this guessing game anymore. They're literally spoon feeding you the answers. And it's a very common issue.
So if you're watching this and you want something to be talked about, just tell me in the comments, write it below, and I'll talk about it. Do it right now so you don't forget. Sorry, go keep on.
Yeah, that's what you call biased action.
This stuff. That's so good.
So there's your users, but there's also people like you mentioned earlier, people with podcast experience. Yeah. I'm sure you're someone that values mentorship a lot. You probably have a community of like-minded people that are trying to do podcasts within your topic area or outside your niche. That's fine. But I think it would be useful to set up a weekly, even a monthly Zoom meeting on their calendar and just debrief or discuss like what do you think's going well and what do you think you're struggling with. So do you feel like you are trying to find new ways to get engagement and you tried this strategy, it didn't work out? Run it through them because they've probably tried the same thing. At the end of the day, they all have like this common goal. They want to build a community. They want to build a presence. They want to convey a message. And they want this to be valuable and reach their target audience. Everyone's united by some common goal in your space. So get clear on what you want to achieve. And then from there, you'll be able to find the right people. And you can say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do with my podcast. I think we would have some common ground here. And I'm someone that's just trying to start off and basically just get the ball rolling. Would you be open to having a weekly or bi-weekly meeting, whatever is most convenient for your schedule? And a lot of these people will be more than willing to help you, from what I guess, right?
So these are actually listeners.
Yeah.
Okay, not like necessarily like peers.
Yeah, these are people that have done podcasts. Ideally, they should have more experience than you, because it can also help to have a balance. Like you can have people that are in your position. You can have people that are just starting. Because another thing is people with too much experience, like let's say 10, 15 years experience, they've probably been so disconnected from the process of starting again or being a newcomer. So it would be useful to have a nice balance. So
because I have a Kara. She's been doing this for a minute. I mean, she literally knew Steve Jobs when he created the podcast. Because Steve Jobs actually created the word podcast. It was him. And she's a legend at what she does, but I don't know if she'd be like the best pick, like you mentioned, because she has been doing it for the longest time. And she's really done like brand deals with her podcast. She works with Vox, the New Yorker. She's balling.
Yeah, wow. No, that's amazing. And the thing with those types of people is you almost feel like, how am I supposed to relate to them? Or how are they going to be able to put themselves in my shoes? Because it's been so long since they started. And that isn't to downplay any of these people by any means. They've done so many fantastic things. And at the end of the day, it's a question of how tailored is this advice for your specific situation. This was the fundamental assumption we built Collegiate on, is there are dozens of competitors that will always have more experience than us. And we're just not going to play that game. We're not playing the experience game, because the way that we've been able to successfully grow is by building a service that is so tailored to a student's specific needs. Let's say on a website, they say 96% of our clients have achieved XYZ results. What happens if you're the 4%? Or what happens if you just don't fit their criteria? Because a lot of the times it can be self-selecting when you're working with a company, or when someone's a mentor mentoring other people that are looking for advice. Something to consider is how much success or how much traction did they already have before they reached out to this person for help. And a lot of the times it's very hard to isolate how much of that was just them individually getting there and how much of that came from someone that was able to actually give them that guidance. How much did their advice really push them to the next level? And that's why you don't necessarily need to get always like the top results for everything that you're trying to accomplish, especially if it's around a specific service. It could really be based on what is this specific person's background and how can I get them from point A to point B, and would they find value in that? So that's why mentorship is a little tricky, because you might think that they have the best credentials, and people aren't, for the most part, they're not lying about it. It's just that it might not be specific to your context. You just might not be the best fit for them. And as a result, the quality of advice or experience that you get from them might not be what you anticipated, because their results and their ethos paint this grand vision that, oh, I'm going to get the same results as all these other people they worked with.
Yeah. It's interesting how some people have such like a heavy emphasis to teach that they forget that they're supposed to help people learn. And the people who help people learn over making themselves feel like they were able to teach are the ones who are able to really elevate the lives of their students. And this is something I especially learned from my coach, Erwin. He is so good, even though like he has like such an incredible amount of wisdom that you might consider him to be one of those guys like they're just so far ahead they might even not know. They might not even like know what it was like to start as a communicator, as a serial entrepreneur, right? Or as a creative. But because they are so passionate about helping people learn to go through the process of what time they are and what season they are in their life and how to overcome the challenges and obstacles that they face, that they have let go of the part of themselves. It's like, I'm here to teach you how to do this, and if you don't get it, then that's on you. Because that's pretty ignorant, if you think about it. Like, there are people, like, to give you an example, one of the things I've realized when I have gone into rooms and I was there to like equip people. There's this one time where I was invited to speak at this business professionalism event where there were like about 80 or 90 students. I think it's like the most people I've ever talked to in like a virtual setting, or even in general maybe, but at least in a virtual setting, where I had to give like a 5-minute pitch to students who did not want to be in the room on why they should show up to this like professionalism like summit. It was like a 2-day thing. And I did the same thing when I was in my fall semester. And bro, I'll tell you, like 95% of the people there did not want to be there. They either like, because you could just check in, you could dip after. And there are so many people that did that. People who like complained that, you know, why do I have to be here? We got other things to do. And I was one of those people. I had to deliver a pitch for an investment fund like the day after the summit ended. So I was busy, bro. I had to lock in on my pitch. I had to do my thing for Smith. And I remember, like, when I entered the room, I was, like, so cognizant of that. And I could have just told them, here's why this is important. Here's what you'll get from it. And I could completely forget about what I was like when I was there, you know, when I was in their shoes. But what I ended up doing was, like, I was like, okay, I'm going to step back and show them the bigger picture. Because something that my professors have told me when I was going through like a really important like program in my first semester is like, you're here in like 4 years, you're paying all this money in tuition, you're going to take on all this debt, you're going to go through the gauntlet in these next 4 years because you want to get a job. You want to figure out what your career will unfold to be. You know, if like you can put it on like a more grander scheme, like you're here to discover your calling. And when I found out like that's what I'm going to be doing in these 4 years, I was like, okay, how am I able to turn this moment where people are reminded of the fact that they have to be here to the reality that this is why I get to be here. And I'm going to try to reframe that. But the way I had to do it was I had to meet them where they were. And that is something that I realized that takes so much work because you have to go through the process of letting go of yourself first, and then you can start to connect to the person you're trying to meet. So yourself is in the way of the person you're trying to meet. And sometimes that person was you a year ago. It's crazy. And that's what I had to do. Thankfully, it went well, except for this one guy who was actually one of my close friends. He He had like for the whole time, even during my talk, bro, he was like on his camera showing like himself playing Clash of Clans. So he was like, it was, and then it's funny, like after like my talk, like someone like called them out, literally unmuted themselves, like, hey, we're focused. So, you know, it was funny. I even like made a reference to that guy during my talk. I was like, I'm so excited for this person to also be here, and like, because they were like making like a huge scene when I was talking because they were my friend. It was hilarious, but outside of the point, I just think that what you mentioned is so true. We forget the reason why we're communicators sometimes is we're here to help people learn, not to teach. Even though that can be a skill set of ours, a gift to teach, right? Something I also want to talk about is something that we've been going through recently, because you know that we've been trying to find an apartment. So Mridul and I, we plan on being together with another friend to be in like a 3-bedroom apartment, and we started this process like pretty early. I would say like last week of February. Mm-hmm. So we started this, and it was not until very recently where we got hopefully the final deal. I don't want to say we have gotten it, considering that the process of talking to this person has been very interesting, and I don't want to say that we haven't until it's finalized, but it's looking good. I don't know if you would agree with that, but it's looking good. And why don't we just talk a little bit about what that's been like? Because we're in the season where people are finding apartments. I was just talking to someone today, actually, that they're looking for a place. It can be stressful. And I don't know, like what has stuck out to you during this whole process of finding an apartment?
What has stuck out? Well, there's a lot of things, actually. Well, I'm anticipating most of the people here are going to be students themselves.
Yeah.
And watching this. So I'm also just thinking about what makes the most sense in terms of a student's experience in college right now as they're searching for off-campus housing, apartments.
Yeah.
You're going through a lot of midterms. You have research papers. Aside from searching for apartments, you're also searching for internships, or you're trying to discover what are your summer plans. Mm-hmm. You're also thinking about how am I going to move my stuff out for the summer.
Yeah.
You're figuring out all of these things at once, and a lot of the times, like, you want to prioritize your grades, but then you get this notice from like the landlord you're talking to, and the thing is, a lot of the times, even when they say things are final, it isn't necessarily final, or there's some like hidden expense or some fee you didn't consider previously, or, you know, they don't necessarily guarantee something you're looking for, such as a transportation solution. If you need to get from like the metro or public transportation to campus. So that entire process, there's just so many unknown variables, mm-hmm. and it's really easy to just want to give up or just not think about it, which unfortunately is the worst thing you can do. It's the most logical thing to do in perspective of your brain, because you want to do what will keep you safe and easy, and it's just more convenient to not think about these things because you feel like, oh, well, it's dependent on so many things that are outside of my control. Why should I even care? But I guess the best approach to handle this is, number one, just write down literally everything that is in your control. How frequently can I contact this person? Because a lot of times they'll say, like, I'll contact you later, but they don't have a clear indication onto when you need to get back. So you need to take that initiative. Mm-hmm. And even if they say, okay, we'll talk to you at 4 p.m. the next day, you call at 4 p.m., they don't pick up, then you still need to follow up with them again. So essentially, don't take it personally if they are doing things that are outside of your control. If they don't respond to you, don't take that personally. Don't take it to heart. Keep looking, and you just need to be on the offense. I guess that's the best way to put it. You should not be in a reactionary position where you're always so dependent on just one person. Yeah. And I think that's something we could have done earlier as well. Yeah. Because we thought that, like, okay, this is going to be easy. It's a linear process. Talk to landlord, see property, express interest, close the deal. But then between closing the deal, there's a lot of in between that might happen. Let's
talk about some of that in between. So I think we found like 2 properties particularly that were interesting. One of the properties that we found was in Friendship Heights, it's around that area, and we went to go visit the property I think it was you and I. The other person wasn't able to make it at the time, who was our friend. But we went, and we arrived there and figured out pretty quickly that the transportation or the commute there was like pretty long, like 35 minutes, man. It was a minute. So we get there, we like are waiting for the person, and it takes a while. I was like, yeah, what's going on? Like, I'm going to give the person the call, the landlord. And I'm like, hey, she picks up, like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, I got the worst news, man. I'm going to be 2 hours late. And I'm like, 2 hours? She said she was going to be 2 hours late. And I was like, I was like understanding, like, okay, I see you're late and you got to make 2 hours, but we're not going to be waiting here for like another 2 hours. And we can't even close our deal. We can't even like see that property. So we were like, okay, we'll come visit another day. And you know what? It turns out that all of us can go. So now my roommate, my other friend, and Mridul, we were like, okay, let's all go together. And we get there again. And what happens the next time? Can you guess what happens the next time? What happens? What happens?
I don't think I have to guess because I was
like, I get a text saying, and then by the way, we were like 2 minutes away from the property. We were walking there because the bus wasn't going to the place. So not only did we have to not take the bus there, but two, like right when we're about to get there, I get a text from her saying, "Hi Caleb, fortunately something happened." That's when I knew like something was up. Like I was like, please don't be like this other situation. And she miscalculated. She apparently was like in Woodbridge, and I was like at least an hour away. And she was like, I don't know if I can make it. And she said, I'm gonna send my son over. So her son comes over, he gives us a tour of the apartment, right? And at this point, like we're already like suspicious, like what's going on here? Like is this person gonna keep their word? And we also just we come to grips with the fact that like it takes like 35 minutes to do a commute, given the bus is on time, if not even longer. And doing like a round trip of over an hour every day, it might not be the best choice. So couldn't close on that one. But with the one we're looking for with this guy, it's been an interesting process. There have been delays. He's an interesting character, but at least he's been willing to cooperate throughout the process. And he's very confident in his properties, especially in his windows. He loves talking about his windows. So, yeah. Every time I guess you could say every time there's a window for him to talk about. Exactly right. Yeah. So it's been interesting. Like you mentioned, I think it's great points. Like one of the things that he said to me when he was describing the final details of the property, like, there have been like, he always loves talking about how many people have been calling. Oh, I got like 15 people calling me today. Like all this interest. But because you guys are so persistent and because you guys are early, I'm going to give you all a shot. Which, if you are persistent, you keep on knocking on that freaking door. And if you had the chance to start early, like, it sets a good impression. And we might have a chance of getting this finalized. Maybe next episode, I'm like, it didn't fall through. Maybe it fell through. I hope not. But it's looking good.
Yeah.
So we might have this figured out. And we've been doing it for a few months. And I don't know. Anything else to add to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 2 things to add, actually.
Yeah.
Number 1 is you're always going to have less leverage as a student versus the landlord. They're always going to have a lot more leverage over the situation because you're the one looking for housing, not them. The alternative for them is if you don't like them, they got like another 500 people that could sign with them anytime. So keep that in mind. When you're approaching this process, in a sense, it's almost like presenting yourself in an interview to an extent. You want to be memorable because this is actually something that I think was really useful when we were talking and following up for the final time, where we're in the talks of actually getting the lease now. Because what I think was very strategic, and you have to be genuine with this too, if you like the landlord, you like how they're treating you. Another thing is if someone is like really confident in their product, that can be a good or a bad thing, but from what I was able to see after like meeting him in person, is very knowledgeable, and you want to think about if push comes
masters of economics.
Yeah, if push comes to shove, and something's not working, there's some defect with the property. Do you actually think this person will follow through? Do you think they're going to come through? And You're going to see how much do they care about giving you a good experience as well. How much do they care about their reputation and their brand? Which is why when someone doesn't follow through on their word consistently, if you are like looking to get into business by any means as well, something very important to keep in mind. First impressions are really important, right? Do not be 2 hours late with less than 2 hours notice. Yeah.
Got clammed
Twice. Twice. So yeah. And then the thing is, like, with the transportation being our main concern, they told us there was a 50% chance that they might have that sorted out by the time we're there.
50%.
No, 60% was the high end.
It was a 10% decrease as she was processing.
Yeah, she was running the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So number 2 is, so 1, build a genuine connection and give them compliments when you actually see fit. Yeah. So we recognize this guy, he was really passionate about his properties, and I did tell him on the phone call today, I was really happy about how knowledgeable he was, how confident and assured he was about the property, and how he was just able to walk us through, give a full context behind how the entire situation unfolded, even though we expected to sign it earlier. So when they walk away from that interaction, they're not just going to think, oh, this was just like every other student that approached me and said, what was the price? What is my monthly expense going to be? What is the parking fee going to be? Instead, they're going to be like, oh, this is the one group of people that actually cared about me. So that's just one tip of advice I would give if this landlord is talking to multiple people. It'd be at the end of the day, you want them to like you as much as you want to like them. So that's another element that I was considering. And I was actually genuine and sincere with the compliment I gave him. Because I wouldn't hand it to anyone like that. Yeah. I did appreciate how much he genuinely cared about this. As interesting of a character he can be at times, because he's very traditional as a very traditional sales approach. Very conventional, confrontational to an extent. Very direct and straightforward, and to an extent, I did appreciate that.
Yeah. He came in with the pomp, bro.
Yeah, because the other person was like the complete opposite, where it was almost like there was no assurance, no certainty, no confidence, no follow through, and that's where I was like, okay, I would actually have trust in this guy.
That's a very interesting dynamic, because like the person who wants to do you the most good, that you want to trust more, will oftentimes not meet the same level of trust you will actually give to the person who might not come across because of how they direct, how much confidence they have. I might be like, interpreted as like cockiness. Like, you might end up giving your trust to that person because of the times that they didn't keep the promises they made to you. Which is something that I think is a very interesting human situation. It's a very interesting human dilemma, because as much as it's important it is to have confidence and do all that, one thing I've been, even outside of this context of finding a property, is also I've been finding out the importance of keeping the promises you make to yourself, because there is a kind of confidence you get that might be seen as, oh, this person is cocky and all that. Because there is this level of self-confidence that you should have. And that's going to actually be a really interesting conversation. What is self-confidence? How do we have self-confidence? I just realized that might be a very interesting conversation. But just to finish what I was saying, right? But one form of self-confidence that I've seen to be extremely powerful is in your confidence to keep the promises you make to yourself. I was in a podcast, and I also had a conversation with someone about how you keep promises you make to yourself. It's just having those really small wins. There have been times especially in college, where I was I made this promise to get up at 8 a.m., 7 a.m., and I end up waking up at 10, right? I wake up at 10 a.m. instead. And I have to learn, how can I learn to trust in my ability to execute? How am I able to regain that trust and that confidence that I'm going to be able to show up the way I want to? It is just a matter of recognizing and keeping track of the small wins, and then seeing okay, I wasn't able to get out of bed at that time, but at least I was able to stay off my phone for the next hour, because I need to focus. And then if that doesn't happen, you're okay, at least I can keep my phone away for like 30 minutes. And then from there, I can like start something. And it's just learning how to get these small wins. And I think when I started doing that, it's like, okay, let's start regaining that self-confidence. And ultimately, that might translate into you developing a confidence that allows you to see others giving trust back to you. When you've seen that, okay, people aren't seeing me for the way that I want to be seen as a trustworthy person. And it works in the micro and then it works out to the macro. It works from the inside out. And I wish that landlord would be able to see the importance of that, because I actually wanted to trust this landlord. She seemed to really care about her tenants. Her son also went to American University. I don't think it was that son. It was probably another son. And she really seemed like someone who was genuine. But because she wasn't able to keep those promises, it cost her. It's tough.
Yeah, no. It's really important, because a lot of times these mishaps don't happen on accident as much as you think they do. Once, it's understandable, but if it becomes repetitive, pay attention to that as quick as possible. Yeah. And yeah, I'd say number 2 is just follow through as much as you can. And it's not over until it's really over. You need to, a lot of the times, even if they say, yeah, if you express you're interested, that doesn't mean the deal is closed. And you want to try to anchor them as much as possible to specific time frames. So like, even when I asked, when is the latest we need to confirm to you before like you might give it to someone else, even then I was asking for a very specific date and I still didn't get that response. So you need to be very careful about, are they indicating a time frame? Because you also want time to also search for other properties as well. And this is like some nitty gritty stuff from like contract law as well. But I think it's important for you to realize that it's not officially like closed until both parties, they've seen the terms, they've seen every single part of this leasing agreement, and then you both have expressed that you're willing to continue with this. Because just saying you're interested isn't enough for them to just not give it to someone else. So I don't want people to have this blind assurance that just because the landlord says like, oh, that's fantastic, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to give it to you. You could wake up the next day and someone signs an agreement and it's wraps for you.
Dude, shout out to Professor Pope.
Yeah.
For putting us on it.
But like another thing is that like you don't want to get too much into like all this legal stuff until you have experience with this. Because even then, like let's say you were right and there are some like smaller things, like if they give you a promise that they'll hold this property open to you for 5 days and you confirm within 4 days you want it, but then they give the lease to someone else, technically they violated another contract. But I don't even think these real estate owners even know about these rules. And even if they did, like I think the consequences are not worth it to pursue like any serious action. Just find somebody else.
Yeah.
It's not worth the hassle, because in the meantime, just find another property. So
yeah,
that's why I think it's not important to get too caught up in those in the legal intricacies of like making promises, breaching contracts. But I do think it's important, at least from our perspective, to know it's not over until it's really over.
Yeah.
They could just hand it off to anyone until everything's
that would be
done.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Man. Please.
Please.
We're on our knees, bro. We cannot have that happen at this point, please. But yeah, great insights. I think it's such a rough time when you're looking for these apartments. I mean, second year, going into our junior year, going through this has taught me so much. Not just on the sales process, but also on how to deal with these kinds of people. Because when we get out of college, we're going to have to repeat this process again, most likely. And I learned a lot. And I'm really glad that you actually like ended up taking the charge for like the last part of it too. If you're doing this if you're not doing this by yourself, I would say also have your friend get like involved, because I was doing most of like the calling for like the first parts. Make sure the person that you're trying to get the apartment with, the room with, are also involved. So that way, if you have two people like calling people or just like following up, it shows that you're persistent. And I remember that's like one of the key factors of one of the X factors of what ended up getting us this far, and hopefully to closing this thing once and for all.
Yeah. No, that's really great that you mentioned that, because I just thought of some reasons as to why persistence matters so much. Think about it from their perspective as well. Sure, they have 500 people. That could be an exaggeration, but they have a lot of people visiting their properties. They have a good amount of interest. How do they know who is serious about their property in particular? Because especially with real estate and properties, everyone's looking around, right? And as a landlord, you're trying to gauge, is this person actually going to be buying from me? Is this person worth my time, right? Because they could be doing other things. They could be playing golf.
Keep giving it a couple swings.
Yeah, get them swings in. But instead, they're talking to you on the phone. And are you making it worth their time as well to be able to talk to you? Because it's so easy to get caught up in, what can these people do for me? You might feel this sense of, like, this is obviously housing. This is like a basic necessity you need. But in practice, they aren't obligated to give it to you, because there's other people that are also interested. So you need to develop a compelling reason as to why they would take you seriously, why they would like you, and why they would also trust you as a tenant as well. Yeah. Because they're also trying to qualify you.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, when you're persistent, it doesn't just show them that you are standing out from the crowd, that are just interested, but that your intention is also like super like unique. It's noteworthy. And I'm glad. I'm really I'm just glad that we're getting close to having this finished, dude.
Yeah.
This has been a process. And if we don't have to do this again for the next 2 years, I'd be happy. I'm really finished. Anyways, another thing that I wanted to talk to you about is actually what's going on in our careers. Because it's this whole housing situation has been a whole journey in itself. But another thing that has been a journey of its own and its own unique and noteworthy rights has been what's been going on in our careers. And I want to have this conversation because I've just been noticing that a lot of the people in my circles or in the business school I'm in, it has been super challenging to find an internship for the summer. The situation differs depending on what you're trying to do, but one of the things that I've just been hearing from a lot of people trying to go into finance or trying to do some administration roles in general for an internship is just how challenging it is to land an internship. And there are other reasons why that may be the case, because some people also start late and that affects your chances a lot. But I think generally most people are looking, and I guess you could say you can apply the same tenant situation. I actually am realizing that the principle applies on who makes it into an internship and who doesn't, just based on the way that people operate in finding a home or finding an apartment, right? Same thing. So there's a whole pool of applicants, and I've just been seeing people who have just been trying so hard, and people who maybe have just started trying, and people who haven't had the chance to. But overall, I think generally it's just been hard for people to get internships. And I made an announcement in my last video that I'm going to be working in California in a sales role. It's a company called Skyline, and I'm going to be doing a lot of sales, specifically door-to-door. And that has been, it's really one of the best things that can happen to me in this time of my life. I'm super excited for it. I'd love to dive more into it. But before I share that, I just wanted to ask you, what has been the conversation you've been having with yourself about career? What has that been like for you or for the people around you, man?
So would you like to hear more about my personal story with my career, or would you like me to also address the first part about students struggling?
Let's work backwards, yeah. Start with the students, and maybe you can tie that into what your story has been like.
Yeah, for sure. A very common issue that a lot of students face isn't just about finding an internship. Really, the deeper issue is, what is their purpose and what do they want to do? You start from there, and you'll actually be able to eliminate 90% of the effort that you would find that you're actually wasting. Because I've talked to some people much older than me. They've all gone through that same process of applying to 200 internships on Handshake. It's like the career center always tells you, hey guys, have you considered going on Handshake? And that's like the most help you'll ever get. But a lot of people are so desperate to just get one internship or just one job, not really asking themselves why do they want to do it.
Yeah.
And it's not just like some philosophical framework or something to just make you feel good at night that, oh, I'm doing something I like. I think it's the most logical thing to do, even from advancing career and even your own stability. Because like I was saying earlier in that example of all these tenants trying to get one property, the recruiter / employer is the equivalent of that landlord or of that tenant, for example. And they know that there's hundreds of, like one intern that's searching for their positions, probably also applying to like 100, 200 other places. Based on that, they're trying to invest in someone that they can really grow their company with. And a common issue is they don't have a clear reason to see why you are personally aligned with their company, right? Because if you're able to take one narrative and basically broadly apply it to 200, 300 different opportunities, does it really seem like they are the one that you want to spend a good amount of your life with? Even though logically speaking in college you want to do multiple internships, you'd be shocked to see how many people, if you ask them genuinely, why do you want to work for this company and why do you actually want to do it? What are your long-term goals? A lot of people won't be able to give a clear answer, and it's not their fault, because there isn't a good support system to help you find those answers out. And that's actually what I'm trying to do with Collegiate, actually. And another thing is, what do you want to do? Why an internship? I think the logical answer is the internship will help me get a job. Secondarily, it will also help you get exposure into an industry. So there's two things right there. And three is gaining relevant skills. And these days, you might also want to think, what happens if there were alternatives to reach those goals without the form of an internship? And that's where project-based learning can come into play, or getting mentorship. And the thing is, these solutions aren't carved out, which is what I'm actually trying to build with my company, is how much... So I'll give you an example. There was a kid who was a sophomore in high school. He was matched with an undergraduate researcher at UT Austin. He was interested in mechanical engineering. The researcher right now, he's doing modeling projects on aerospace engineering. And what they were able to do is they were able to sit in weekly calls with each other. He was able to explain his research. He was showing him some modeling frameworks. And he had a science Olympiad competition coming up. And he was able to create this model paper airplane. It's not just a regular airplane. You throw it in the air once and it'll like go in circles for like 5 minutes. And it was a very like intricate design, and it was able to win second place at some national competition.
Wow.
And the goal of that wasn't to help him win or get close to winning a science Olympiad competition. One, this kid was able to get hands-on experience. They actually knew, what does mechanical engineering look like? What does the research side look like? They got first-hand experience with someone that's actively involved in that field. Whereas your alternative is wait until your junior year, maybe sophomore year of college, just to get an internship that gives you very minimal experience. Because most internships, it's always this element of trust. Getting the internship, they have to filter out through thousands of applications. And the way they really filter out these days is referrals, word of mouth. Have you talked to enough people at the company? That's how you get into a company's internal pipeline. From there, you actually have a foot in the door to even get a chance at landing a job. Once you get in the job, that's only step one. Step two, most opportunities, you won't actually, you might not even get the experience you're looking for because you were so desperate. And you're so desperate to get into one position. And I don't blame students by any means, because I was in the same boat too. I just wanted one position that would look good on my resume and that would also advance my career. But really, how much exposure are you really getting into your field? How many skills are you getting? And that's why I think there's such a huge gap between what young professionals have and what they're looking for, because internships they don't even seem like a sustainable solution for a lot of students unless they can really build a very personalized connection with that firm.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That's so good. And I think, oh, wow. Dude, there's so much I want to say now.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of like different ways we can approach this conversation with all the insights you just shared. Because something that I've like learned to discover as I've landed this position over the summer is what I'm actually doing isn't like something that I suppose would be like super, like for example, I'm going to be working on the field like every day, just knocking doors. That's like bottom line. That's what I'll be doing. I'll be knocking and getting a lot, not just knocking them. I'm gonna have a lot of doors closed on my face too. But what I'm seeing in that is like, oh my goodness, there's like an incredible opportunity to learn how to form like quick human connections at the highest level at every single door. And if I want to go into sales, and my vision for this is not just like working, not just in that industry, but working ultimately in this tech sales industry. That's what you'll be doing every single day too. I had the chance to go to this amazing convention yesterday. It was the Salesforce. Basically, it was their main event to help like prospect customers and current customers learn about what they do, about what they can offer for them and their company. And the reason why I went there was because I knew like Salesforce was one of the biggest companies that hired SDRs or sales development representatives. And if I wanted to break into it, why not go to one of the events that they host? Not really for students, but for customers, but that I can meet potentially some really cool people that work at the company, and maybe you learn more about the technology and the conversations that matter to them. And I went there, and dude, it was an amazing event. I learned so much about what Salesforce does. I learned about what conversations they're having. What's interesting is their CIO had a very interesting insight at the panel that he delivered for a lot of government workers at the very beginning of the convention, where he's like, before I start a conversation on AI, I start the conversation talking about data. And I think data was talked a lot more than AI, interestingly. And you get to learn about what matters to them, what they care about. What do they want from people that not just will use their technology, but what do they want from people that work for them? Because you see all their employees talking about the values of the company. And the one thing that was mentioned the most was trust, right? Which we talked a lot about today, actually, right? How do you deliver trust at the highest level? In the backdrop of like this new technology that might end up, taking away some of that trust, because AI might replace some of the workers for Salesforce too. How do you make it so that you can have a transparent culture in the midst of that? And they talked all about it. And there's this one particular moment that really changed everything for me. I was just walking around the convention center for like waiting for like one of the sessions to start, and I really wanted to talk to the CIO of Salesforce, who is Juan Perez, if I'm not mistaken. Shout out to him, amazing guy. And as I was walking, I just like had him on my mind. And I remember like passing through some of the executive meeting rooms. And the reason why I knew is because it had like the little banners just saying executive meeting rooms. And I was like looking around, I see him in one of the rooms. But I was like, I can't just walk in. I mean, this guy is locked in. He's talking, I could tell, to like a lot of other execs. But I ended up sneaking into one of the meeting rooms that they had for like people who just wanted to have meetings with their teams at Salesforce. And I got to overhear some of their conversations. And bro, deals are being made, man. I see like I overheard like these two like government employees talking about like huge deals that they might strike with either Salesforce or Oracle. I'm like fascinated. But what ends up happening was I end up walking out and I see these people in a table in front of the meeting room where this guy, the CIO of Salesforce, is at. And I end up asking them like just because I was curious, like, hey, do you happen to know when they are going to be coming out so I can meet this guy? And they're like, I don't know. But why would you like want to meet him? And I just told them how I was like attending his event earlier. And they remember them saying, you know what? Like the fact that you're here and like you're looking to meet him and to like explore this is like already like a lot. And they are just curious to know, like, so what led you here? Why are you here? And that is like and that's the key phrase. Why are you here? Because I went on to explain that I found out that I really want to enter this new industry, and that I pivoted literally 2 weeks ago from like being a finance major to now like choosing a completely different path for like business admin with entrepreneurship and iTech, which is information technology. But that was besides the point. Like what ended up happening that led me to that particular point was I had to ask myself the question, like, why am I here? And before I was at that conference, I was also working as an investment analyst for like 3 semesters. You know this. I talk about it quite a bit. I sold like equities to this investment fund for my students. Discovered I was pretty decent at it. Definitely not enough to the point where I would spend all my time late mornings trying to figure out how to make a model work, how to write a good report, but ultimately pitching it to them. And I did that for enough times. Over the summer, I had a nightmarish externship experience. And I did this thing with like a consulting externship with PwC and this nonprofit. Great. It was great. Well, I think I have nothing against the people who ran it. It's just that when I started doing it, I figured out that like I just could not make it because I had to just consume so much information that it just felt like it was going against the grain of just the way I was wired. I think I could articulate it better, but it was simply too much for me. And since it was remote, I also was struggling a lot to keep up. And next thing you know, I was behind. And so I ended up dropping that. So that was the end of the consulting experience for me. So I went through all these failures, but over that period, I figured out like what I wanted to do. But it wasn't until I really put together that final piece very recently. I like, oh wow, like I really enjoy like cultivating relationships with people, and I'm also like designed to do that. I'm designed to enjoy communication. I'm designed to enjoy like working with all sorts of relationships. Because even though in that investment fund, I worked with a lot of difficult people. I mean, I really enjoyed that challenge. Like I loved it when people like told me like my idea wasn't good enough, because that helped me get closer to a better idea and to discover what mattered to them. I would have a way of like seeing those situations in a different light. And what I found out was like, okay, communication, influence, and sales. And I was a tech sector analyst at my time in the investment fund, and I really enjoyed like learning about technology. And I thought to myself, like, wouldn't it be cool if I could do all that, and if I could just find some sort of way I could bring it all together. And all of that like connecting the dots was a very long version of figuring out my why. And then I put it all together, and I was like, okay, let's see if there's this thing like called sales tech can actually work. And then after I figured that out, I started seeing things I did not see before. Like I looked up, I just looked out of curiosity. Can I find something that can get my foot in the door? And is there like an event in DC where I can go? And I just searched up like top company for sales tech is Salesforce. So it was a Salesforce DC event. 8 days from that where I searched that, there was going to be a huge like event that Salesforce was going to host. And next thing you know, I'm there talking to these people, and they link me up to someone who runs like the SDR program. And I am in the process of that right now. And it's like huge. Like literally just by figuring out my why, like a filter opened up in my mind that was able to like find the right opportunities at the right time. People talk about being in the right place at the right time, especially when you talk about career. And finding like, oh, I just met the right person at the right time. Like, oh, I just found this event. And like, you sometimes see people like go to all these events, and you're like, how do they know what to look for? And I didn't know what to start looking for until I started to become more self-aware of who I am, of what I liked, and what I really didn't like. And I think I went through that process so deeply over these past 2 years that clarity arose. And I think it's just helped me find out these events and these opportunities, and to start a career that I might actually enjoy. And even if I don't, I know that this next step or after graduation, this kind of role is going to help me find what I ultimately do enjoy. But I wish someone would have walked me through that, because when I was going through the process of like going through the trenches in the investment fund, I thought that was going to be it. Like I was going to do that. And I have come to realize that letting go very quickly of the things that you find out you are not naturally good at, is super important. And I think people can take that the wrong way. But what I figured out is if you can be decent at something that you put in a lot of work at, in a world where people can do that same thing but have twice or three times the result as you might need to reconsider something. I don't like using like how others are doing compared to me as like a metric, but when I'm doing something that I'm considering to be like, okay, my career or like my work, my craft, then that's really important. And there is a place where you need to realize what are you designed to do, and also what do you enjoy doing and what you don't do enjoy. And it's been a very interesting journey. I'm excited to see where that goes for me. But that's been like something I just wanted to share with you all, and something I'm interested in hearing. Like, what do you think? How has that journey been like for you? I know you mentioned that you are in the process of working in collegiate, and you share some really interesting insights too about what looking for your purpose might look like. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I just give some context behind what my career plans were before this.
Yeah.
A lot has changed over like the past couple of days. I think the way I'm going to see my career long term is almost done a complete 180.
Yeah, man.
So beforehand, it was this idea that, okay, I'm going to go through undergrad, I'm going to study a bunch of different subjects, see what I like, and then I'll go to law school and specialize, combine my interest in the law with a specific branch that I found very compelling in undergrad. So what that means is you don't just go to law school to study the law. You need to pick a specific area to specialize in. Same thing with medicine. You don't just become a doctor. Generally, you'll specialize in some type of area, unless like you want to do something more general like family medicine. It's completely fine. So far, my plan was go through undergrad, graduate, do all in the LSAT, maybe get 1 year of work experience, like corporate work experience outside of just my company, and then I go to law school. Until you don't really start to question why you're doing these things or you don't even reconsider them until a bigger opportunity arises, or you experience a level of pain you never anticipated you would. So I think for you, with that externship, you realized, okay, consulting's not for me. This is not what I'm wired to do. And I think having that self-awareness takes so much courage. But what I will say is that it honestly takes more mental effort at that time to abandon something you're currently doing and being true to yourself than just robotically going through the same motions just because you felt, just because I stuck to this, I'm just going to do it for the rest of my life. And it is this weird conundrum because people will tell you in order to be great at anything, you have to be willing to do hard things. So just because something is difficult doesn't mean you're just going to throw in the towel.
That's true.
And give up. But you need to find this balance and say, what is the difficulty I'd be happy to spend the rest of my life doing? What would it's almost like, in a weird way, what type of suffering would I enjoy? And any career, there's going to be things that you don't like, which is why it's so clear and so important to get big on your purpose. And it's so easy to just go through the motions and follow the same footsteps as everyone else, because if you see other people doing it, your brain will rationalize that and think, if 500 of my classmates have done finance, they've done these clubs, and they've gotten this internship, and they're getting this salary, I'm going to be able to replicate that same lifestyle in my 20s. I'm going to be making good money. I'm going to be moving to New York City, living a good life in my 20s. But then in the process of that, you're so busy getting caught up on what everyone else is doing that you lose sight of what you're doing for yourself. And I started asking these questions when there was that big trigger for me. So I think fundamentally, people just in general will reconsider a lot of their life goals and missions only when something like I mentioned earlier, is so big and such a large opportunity that they really have to question themselves on why they're sticking to the current path that they're on. Or number two, when they start experiencing so much pain and negative emotions that they just internally say something has to change. I think those are the two main triggers for any behavioral or fundamental identity shift. And that's something I've learned with this this guy that Caleb's also invited on the podcast, his name is Adi. He's a great guy. He helps a lot of students, not just with academics. He's an academic coach, but I've been in conversation with him more in terms of just finding like a dominant purpose, because there's so many things I want to do. And either you have too many things you're trying to do and you can't figure out what one's the right one for you, or there's too little. You feel like you don't even know where to get started. And for me, I feel like I'm diving into so many different things. My major's interdisciplinary. I'm also doing a startup. I'm potentially thinking about going to law school. So I'm thinking, what should I even optimize for? And long story short, I guess I could mention it here then. There's this program called the residency. It's been supported by very influential business leaders and people that are big in the entrepreneurial space. And also they have legal advisors, real estate advisors for students that want to get started. They have PhDs. And most notably, Sam Altman is on the board of this program.
Oh, wow.
And it's the selective group where they get this network of entrepreneurs to basically stay in one house or one large house and basically build. And it's just a combination of different entrepreneurs building their own companies, and they get advisors. They have like a network of VCs and investors. So it's like this, basically this very organized community to help encourage innovation. And Ishan, one of my co-founders, he applied on behalf of Collegiate, and we got accepted into the program.
Oh my God.
And it's going to be at Harvard over this summer. And the thing is, right now, the way the program is structured, only one co-founder or one founder goes to this program. But we haven't finalized everything. The reason why I didn't want to give all the details right now is because there is potential for all three of us to be able to go to Harvard and go to this program, meet other student entrepreneurs, and be a part of this network, receive mentorship from this program. And the reason why I said this can really fundamentally alter where my career is going is because if I go down the path of going to the residency, we get in connections with people at Y Combinator, for example. This is just a hypothetical scenario that we have been discussing. Come next summer or even winter 2025, we pitch at YC off of a connection we've already built, because the residency has connections to lots of VCs,
Yeah, that makes sense.
a lot of investors. If we get funding from YC, obviously they're not going to want me to go to law school. They're going to want me to work full-time on the startup. And also, why not? If I get institutional backing from one of the most influential and prestigious incubators in the entire world, that's an opportunity I don't think I'll ever get in a long time. So then I start asking, well, why was I considering law school this whole time when maybe my calling is just to be part of the startup world? If we go through YC, we get funding, we get backing, worst case, the entire business flops, I still definitely think that it's not like my career just comes to a halt there. We got backing from YC. There's no reason why I couldn't get involved with another startup in the future, or why I couldn't take on another role, because if I'm able to get to that level, there's no reason why I wouldn't be able to pivot off of something else. And then I was really thinking about it, and the whole reason law school applied to me was because it was an intersection of what I believed I was good at and what could give me financial stability. Law school, in my mind, I think to many students, it gives you this aura of prestige and stability that you feel like you might not get from other career paths. Because I couldn't see myself doing something too STEM related for my whole life. But law school, on the other hand, I liked a lot of the argumentation, the research, the critical thinking. It felt very intellectually stimulating when I worked at a law firm and we drafted wrongful termination cases. And I just believed that that was my destiny. I did speech and debate for 7 years. This is the most logical path forward. My parents would be proud of me of becoming a lawyer. And I could go into any social environment, tell them I'm a corporate lawyer that specializes in M&A. I'd gain that respect, and I'd feel socially accepted. So really, it really just came down to safety. That's what law school was to me. It was safety. And it's not something I'm clearly ruling out, but is the whole purpose of my existence picking the safest path? That's what I started questioning myself on.
That's tough.
Yeah. And something I often ask myself is, when I'm in my 70s and my 80s, I'm a little grandfather on my rocking chair and telling my grandkids, hey, this is the life I lived. Would I be proud about telling that story? Would I be able to live with the reality that I gave up a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity just to be another NPC lawyer? So, like I said earlier, it's not confirmed all three of us will be able to go yet. Just yet, we need to talk to them because their program's designed for just one founder. But I see no reason as to why we couldn't just live close to that area and just go to the house and build with Ishan. But we're still in the middle of discussing that. But regardless, this does definitely change the trajectory and vision of where a collegiate may potentially head towards. Because before we saw this as, this is like a part-time hustle we're doing. Maybe Jesse in the future, he's going to be working at Fang or some big tech company maybe in a couple years if collegiate didn't work out, or that would be his goal. Or Ishan would also be working for another tech company, and then I would be working in law. And then every weekend we would meet with each other. We would primarily just be managing the company. We would have good operational systems, and it would just be a good side of passive income and kind of like a side business we run. But now this is different. This could literally be our full-time. This could be our entire life in our early 20s. And I really think this is the perfect age to do it, because later on, I'm probably going to have a family. I'm going to be married. I'm going to have kids. And pitching to YC by then will be very difficult. When we're in our 20s, we're young. I had a very interesting conversation with my parents. I was very surprised how supportive they were, because my mom in particular wants me to follow a very traditional path that's secure. That's why law school is so compelling to her. But I think I've also built enough social proof and credibility that this company is actually heading somewhere. And there's another thing, right? If there is an entrepreneur watching this, or an aspiring entrepreneur, you can't be resentful that people don't believe in your idea when you get started. That's an unfortunate reality. Like, you hear all these successful people on podcasts like these, they might say, oh, everyone was hating on me since day one. Nobody believed in me. And to that I'll say, like, why would they believe in you if you haven't proven anything to the world? You can't expect strangers, even other people, to think you can really pull something off unless you show some sign of traction or some sign of credibility that what you're doing is actually going somewhere. But before that, you can't take it personally that people don't believe in you at the start. You do have to filter out that noise, though, and really determine what you're going to be doing for yourself. Because if you have a strong self of belief in what your mission is, that is what's going to be driving you forward. If you're starting any organization and it's too dependent on external opinions, it's like a captain on a ship taking 6, 7, 8 different opinions and orders, saying we need to set the ship going this way. No, matter of fact, you need to turn it around. And if you take too many directions from other people, you'll never actually be able to figure out where do you want to go. So I would say don't let the social aspect of starting your own organization or your own mission deter you too much, because you should honestly expect most people to not believe in you because you haven't given them a reason to believe in you. Especially at our age, I'm not like a PhD or a domain expert in a particular subject. Really, the best way I could prove that this works to other people is by actually showing revenue and traction and growing the team. So that's why I feel like that conversation was naturally easier with my parents, because I don't want this to give the wrong impression where a lot of students see people on TikTok that just say, oh, drop out of college, go run your own business, do drop shipping, all the drop shipping bots. And I do believe that type of advice can be harmful, because You definitely want to hedge against some level of risk. The reason why collegiate was so ideal beforehand is because this is something we do part-time. We're full-time students, part-time entrepreneurs, and then during vacations, we work on the business the whole time. But now, that entire trajectory changes because if we get real seed funding and backing from YC, for example,
Yeah.
that could literally just be our whole life from there.
That's so good. Dude, what an amazing news. This is my first time hearing this news, by the way. He told me that there was something big happening last night, but this is it. First, congratulations. I could not think of someone more deserving to have such an incredible opportunity to scale and to be in one of the most prestigious and important environments. And it's kind of ironic, to put it that way, because you will be in one of the most prestigious and, I guess, I don't want to say safe, but it is certainly one of the best ways to grow your startup into something extremely successful. And to be in this kind of environment in Harvard, in an organization that has Sam Altman on the board. Who knows, maybe he'll pull up one of those days. And next thing you know, I see you posting on LinkedIn, you're photo with Sam Altman. Like, wouldn't that be something? And I know, like, you guys are still figuring out the details about who's going to go. Or who knows, maybe y'all would, like, live outside of the residency and Ishan has his time in Harvard. This goober, dude, it's so funny. I love him. But I still find that, interestingly enough, the people who look for the risk, the people who look to take a chance on the uncertain and to explore the unknown, they are often the people who end up becoming the ones who are perceived to have the prestige, the ones who have, like, the aura of, like, oh wow, they have got something done and they're worth knowing. And that's a difference. The difference between being known for something and being worth knowing. Because the people who are worth knowing, they've created so much value and they have taken on so much risk, calculated risk, like you mentioned, part-time entrepreneur, full-time student, but they've done that thing that people haven't done to a certain tenacity that they've turned into something where they are now worth knowing. And that's certainly something that you have done through collegiate, and that's super exciting. So I don't think I might see you over California over this.
The good thing is that this starts June 1st.
Oh,
So
okay.
maybe if we get time to see each other in May,
May.
it could be possible.
Yeah, that sucks. Yeah, I'll be in SoCal either way, so I'm gonna be, like, flying out to San Francisco to see you somewhere between the time when I arrive, which is like the first week of May. I actually got the flight confirmation. I got the flight details. It got confirmed pretty recently, so I'm excited for it. But that's so exciting. Like, we were discussing about the importance of finding purpose, and I talked about how I come to do that through being a part of the investment fund. I think one of the overarching takeaways that I want to focus on quickly is on this idea that we need to do hard things, because I love how you mentioned that we interestingly have to find a purpose in our suffering, because there needs to be some form of struggle. We talked about this with Miriam too. Like, there needs to be some form of struggle, of suffering, something that comes from being intentional about doing hard things in your life, especially in our 20s. I'm like I would go as far as say I'm pretty radical on this. Like, we need to do hard things, and it develops us in a way that shouldn't be avoided in our age. And I think culture can tell you to take care of yourself in a way where you should avoid doing hard things. But oftentimes what it misses the nuance of finding purpose to do hard things. And I love how our conversation was able to bring in this important element that gets overlooked, is that if you want to do hard things, have that intention. But before you even do that, ask yourself, like, the why and finding out the purpose. And I can tell you, like, when I was going to that investment fund environment, because I started in that environment since I got here to AU, I had a chance, because I was intentional about looking for opportunities, even though I was a finance major and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I was intentional. I found people who were running programs, and I joined them, and then that program led to another thing. And then when I got in the environment, I was there such a like early time in my time in AU, in my career, that I did those hard things, but I was always intentional of finding, okay, well, what's the purpose behind this? And when I've had the chance to realize, oh my gosh, it's kind of like with that moment where Bezos was talking about on the Lex Fridman podcast. He was a physicist. Bezos, he was working on a problem with a couple like peers, and they took that problem to someone because they couldn't figure out the problem. They spent like hours upon hours figuring it out, and the peer solved it in less than a minute. And then Bezos said, that was a moment where I started rethinking my career as a physician. I don't know if I'm going to become a physics major. And it's good that he ended up finding out, like, there are people who have spent way more time than, not way more, but way less time than I have on this. But for some reason, I think I'm supposed to go into something else and still do the hard thing of becoming an industrial engineer or like whatever engineer he became. He didn't stay away from doing hard things. He actually leaned into his purpose and still did it. And that's so important. So, man, congrats. I'm so glad that you were able to just be a part of such an incredible team at Collegiate and has now taken you to the residency. Like, man, that's exciting. Mm-hmm. For real.
Yeah, I appreciate all of this, man. And that was such a big conversation I had with Ishan and Jesse. We were literally talking for probably just like 3-4 hours. Like, what is our life going to look like now? Because it would have been very comfortable for me to say, like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll just do a traditional internship and just hedge against my career, because I don't know where Collegiate might be in 4 or 5 years. But I know for sure that if I do XYZ steps, that I'll be relatively stable in my early 20s, mid 20s. But the thing was, I really came to terms with, what do I want to be remembered for? I think that's a really loaded question, because there's so many things you need to answer, from a personal, social, career, so many different angles to approach that question. But if all you want to do in life is follow something that's convenient and guaranteed, and no one can escape death. I listened to Steve Jobs' commencement speech, and I watched it recently, and it reminds me a lot of the conversation we've had throughout this entire episode. The first part of his speech was about connecting the dots, and he said, your life will not make sense to you in the moment when you're young. The dots only connect when you look backwards. So when he's talking about designing the Macintosh, for example, while he was taking a calligraphy class, he learned so much about art and design and style. And a lot of the typography, he was able to transcribe a lot of the fundamental concepts he learned from calligraphy into one of the most influential products he was able to make. And obviously at the time he thought, okay, this literally has no real world application. I might be wasting my time, as a matter of fact. This class won't take me anywhere. And same thing for us. We might think, oh, that externship might have been a waste of time. Or any student watching this thinks, I wasted all that time applying to 500 internships, and I didn't even hear back from the company I wanted. Well, maybe those dots will connect and lead you to something much bigger. Maybe you weren't supposed to be getting that opportunity in the first place, because there was something meant for you that was a lot bigger than what you anticipated. And it will only make sense to you if you continue to seek out hard things and align it with a personal, intrinsic motivation, a purpose, like you like to mention it. And I guess this sounds very theoretical. I always like leaving people at something actionable. So in terms of finding your purpose, literally sit down in a room, put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Don't have any other person disturb you. Have a pen and a piece of paper and start writing, what do you dislike? That's the easiest place to start. What do you absolutely despise? In terms of like a work perspective, what type of people do you not want to work with? That's another thing. You don't, like, maybe for example, I want to be in an environment where people aren't controlling every little thing I do. I want to be in an environment where I have the freedom to make mistakes, obviously calculated mistakes as well. I can't just be like accidentally like losing the company like $50,000 on some random purchase. Like, obviously, you need to be reasonable with what type of mistakes you're talking about. But big picture, focus on what type of environment do you want to be in. Are you someone that likes a lot of structure? Maybe when you're in a class, you can find out, did I like the classes where there was like a step-by-step module? I knew exactly what I was going to do. There was a study guide that told me exactly how to study for each concept. Do you want a very predictable work lifestyle? And you can gather that information even if you don't have work experience. Like I was saying earlier, you could kind of grasp at what did you like about certain teachers and the way they treated you. What did you like about different coaches and different mentors? Focus on what you hate first, and then just flip it around, and you would find the opposite to be true for what you like. So if you hate a controlling environment, you might like something that gives you a lot of freedom. If you hate people that are very assertive, then you want to work with people that are very cooperative. Or maybe some people do want to be in an assertive position, and you might want to seek out positions where you can be able to replicate that in your day-to-day. So that's a very simple framework, and it sounds simple, but it's often the simple things that will make the biggest impact, because we think there's going to be some big picture solution, a light switch that we can flip on, and all of a sudden our problems will go away. In reality, it's all the simple things right in front of you that you've been ignoring for so long. It's very rare for students to actually like sit down by themselves and write out, what do they don't like, what do they like, where do they want to go moving forward. And any questions you currently have, write it down, and next time you go on these LinkedIn coffee chats and talk to other industry professionals, you have a very valuable tool to ask them for questions. Now it's not just, oh, what do you like about this company? You sound like a bot. Like anyone can ask that question. But if you can like literally write down and say, on a very personalized experience, what you have found that you don't click well with in work environments, and this is what you're looking for, then you've very specifically asked them, do you find any overlap between what I'm looking for and what you currently experience in your role? That person will take you way more seriously too, because you really thought about that question. You asked something so personalized, and you'll get so much more value out of that in return. So maybe it takes an hour or two, maybe even 3 hours to discover what you really want, but those 3 hours will save you 500.
No, that's so good. And maybe even like a few days. I've tried doing that exercise, and I still haven't fully written out everything I want. One last thing to add to your framework. When you finish writing that down, don't just leave it there. Be intentional about coming back to it. If possible, create a rhythm where you can come back and remind yourself of that. Because one thing I've also learned is when you remind yourself of your why, what the subconscious will do is that it will start to look for ways to help bring you towards that, bring you closer to that. And it's actually true. It happened to me when I found out about the Salesforce events. I would have seen something like that before. I was connecting the dots, and I would have missed it. And I actually found another conference that I want to go to in a few weeks. And some of the things that are happening right in my backyard in DC, I would have completely missed. And I think asking, what am I missing after you finish that? Because you might find that something is missing from what you wrote. Asking yourself, what am I missing, will continue to peel back the layers of your why, and will help you get closer to what intrinsically motivates you, like you mentioned. So I think that's excellent. Yeah, man. We've been talking for almost an hour and 40 minutes. Yeah.
Wow.
This conversation has flown by. I also think I'm going to be late to my 4:05. So I'm going to have to, dude, this has just been an amazing conversation. Like, thank you for taking the time to be here. I knew like we needed to talk about careers some way, and the way that we just talked about it has just helped me. You've also, dude, this has been such an incredible conversation not just as a person, like having it with you, but also being a recipient of it. Like this has been incredible. I think you've helped me as well on this journey of finding purpose and finding my why. And I'm so glad I get to be your friend in this process, because this has helped me lean more into it. And I don't think I would be as intentional as I was without you. And I appreciate that, man.
Hey, I can echo the same exact sentiments to you, man. Every time I'd be more than happy to hop on another one of these episodes.
First returning guest too.
Yeah, exactly. First guest, first returning guest.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. Wow, some lifetime loyalty for the brand right here.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm also incredibly grateful for you to give me the opportunity to talk about these things. I'm glad I was able to benefit you. I also realized that you also challenged me to think even deeper and more critically. And in turn, that even helps me. So as I'm giving you my insights, I'm also learning at the same time from hearing how I'm going to process this in a new way, and also hearing how you are reacting or tying it to another experience that you had with going from your externship, how it led you from that to Reed and Smith, and then now your current events at Salesforce and your interest in tech. So
it's exciting.
Yeah, I think it's really good for us to just be in communication and contact about what we're going through right now at this stage, because I think both of us are dramatically changing in what we're looking for. And it's really useful to have someone to relate to that's really putting in the effort to be reflective and serious about what they actually want in their lives, even if it's uncomfortable. It really ties full circle into doing hard things, because finding your purpose is not easy, but giving up would make an even more difficult life, right?
And we'll end it at that. Make sure to leave a comment on what you want me or Mridul and I again in the future to talk about in the next episode. So don't forget, leave that in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As I usually say, if there's someone like you, they'll probably want to listen to something similar. Appreciate everyone who's listening to this. Any final concluding remarks?
Yeah, I mean, after this video, if you've made it through, it shows that you have a lot of intentionality behind what you want to do with your life, because these days it's very rare for people to watch through a long form media.
For real.
It's short form, like 15 seconds. It's so easy. And I know you got to get to class, so I'll try to keep this brief. But really, by giving feedback into what you're looking for, it can also help Caleb a lot too in terms of being more intentional about what videos he could make. Because I'm not the only guest in the world that can provide insight. I have my own experiences.
Yeah.
But I've just been hearing some news about some of the guests he has on the lineup. And
it's interesting.
Just saying, he's a man of many networks and many connections. So by letting him know what you guys are looking for, you can have some really influential people on this podcast.
Yes. And I know that when you guys go through that, he will be one of those people like Sam Altman to come back on.
It's got a long time before that.
Dude, and I can't wait to get that selfie.
Yeah.
To get a view or whoever is going there with Sam Altman. It's going to be great. Anyways, that wraps things up. Thank you guys. What an amazing conversation. And as usual, peace.
I feel like he does care about his properties. He cares about his reputation.
And he cares about his windows. He was telling me
no,
about
dude. The guy's windows. Let me tell you why we got the best windows in Spring Valley, son.
Dude,